What made President Reagan a great president? We went through a terrible time. We were no more than just 12 years out of some horrible assassinations of Martin Luther King. Then we had the Vietnam War, we had Watergate, and then we had the Carter years where we were told to wear sweaters and turn down our thermostats. And so that it almost seemed like America was in decline. Look, we all know the country has faults. We all know that we have some challenges, but his greatness was that he knew that as Americans we could overcome not only our faults, but we could fulfill the promise of our founding fathers. And he would inspire Americans to be, if you will, that shining city upon the hill.
I would describe President Reagan as genuine and also principled. He had very strong ideas about what it meant to be an American and how we should conduct ourselves throughout the world. And I think that was part of his agenda, was to be very genuine and to be principled.
The other I would describe him as a realist. He really saw the world as it was and the dangers in the world. And part of that understanding the world was that he understood that people yearned for freedom. He understood that the Soviet Union, Russia, and this is relevant to today, that there are evil people out there who run evil empires. And he was a realist and he would call them out for it. And that sort of plain talk, I don't think people had heard plain talk like that since maybe Harry Truman. So a realist and would be another term I would describe President Reagan.
I think President Reagan's legacy too is a contrast to what we're having today. He worked across the aisle regularly with Democrats because that was the way you got things done, and consensus and compromise were always good things. It's so distressing, and I'm so grateful I'm not serving now because I think that it's so nasty and they're not working together, and as a result our problems are worse. For students today who, because they may not have studied more recent presidents, I hope they will go back and study President Reagan among others and see how he approached governing through consensus and through strong convictions.
I think for high school students to know who President Reagan was, as they study history, they could really look at the turmoil that we had leading up to his tenure in office. There was a threat of nuclear war, like all the time. And by him deciding we're really going to beef up our national security and really just, if you will, stare down the Russians to where we had true disarmament in the sense that the Soviet Union with their nuclear threat collapsed. I would encourage students to go back and look at those times and to see how President Reagan's tenure in office helped change the course of history.
I'm grateful that we have the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute and Library, and I think it's so important now. We've gone back to how it was when President Reagan took office in some respects, so it's important that we continue to remind people of how hard he worked to dismantle the Soviet Union and how hard he worked to bring greater peace to the world and to show how strong America is. In a lot of respects, we don't have that now, and I think it's so important that we remind everybody, and maybe if we can, people can revisit President Reagan's tenure, that they'll move forward with a different mission now in the current climate, which is more dangerous.